Hey guys, welcome to our live stream here. We have Dean Koski, head men's soccer coach at Lehigh University, with us today. Dean's been there for 31 years, which we were just talking a little bit before we hopped on. It's an anomaly, and it's really due to who he is as a person, as a coach, as a human being. He's been an incredible mentor for me. So Dean, I'm so happy to have you here today to speak about the recruitment process. So thank you so much.
Yeah, Elliot, thanks. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I love what you're doing.
Over the years, when you first came on 31 years ago, how has that recruitment process changed up until today?
Significantly. And I would tell you that 30 years ago, most of the recruitment was done, by telephone, getting stats, all state players, all league players from their high school schedules and their high school participation. Very little recruitment was done out of the club environment. High school was still considered the best platform, if you will, for recruiting. And so, went to high school games whenever we could. And with the conflict of our college schedule and high school schedules, most of those games were state playoff games and trying to see as many kids as we can. But candidly, I would say 50 to 60% of the kids that I recruited, I never saw play. They visited and they had stats with them and they had articles with them, but there was very little video, if any, and shockingly, not a lot of in-person seeing them play. And fast forward to today, now we see kids play in a club environment, which has surpassed the high school experience. And I'm not going to suggest that high school isn't important. It is important for a lot of different reasons, but 99% of our recruiting is through club. And it's seeing kids play not just once, probably 4 or 5 times before we make a final decision. And a large part of that decision is not just about how good of a player they are, not only how good of a student they are, but what kind of person they are, what their family background's like, what their character's like, whether or not we think is a good fit for us and for them, because I don't want to end up recruiting someone that doesn't align with our values, or we don't align with their values or what their needs are. And so if a kid is interested in physical therapy and we don't have physical therapy as a major, I'm not going to encourage him to look at Lehigh if that's something that's important to him. And so all those things have to align for us and for them for it to be a good fit. But it's a longer process that begins with us evaluating them the end of their sophomore year and into their junior year. We are not interested really in talk. We can't talk to parents who are freshmen and sophomores. Certainly, they will come to our ID clinics, but freshman, sophomore year is a little bit early for us to evaluate kids. Junior year is a sweet spot. And so the summer after their sophomore year, going into their junior year and post-junior year is where we really focus most of our attention.
What does that education process look like for you when you're taking parents and student athletes through the process? Like, do you have to mentor them through the process? And would it be helpful for them to come into that process a little bit more well-educated?
Look, information's the most important commodity that we can all have in life. And certainly the more educated the parents are about the process, the better. And as a president of Lehigh Valley United and also the director of the college process, I try to spend as much time as I can with families, whether I'm presenting to the whole club or presenting to teams about the college process. I think where parents and prospects get lost is when there are expectations because they're spending and investing a great amount of money into the club soccer experience. And there is an expectation that because of that they're going to get the kind of exposure that's going to lead them to not only a Division I experience, but potentially a scholarship experience. And what happens with that mindset is that they tend to ignore the Division II, Division III interest early on being their junior year, because they're holding on to the hope that they're going to get recruited and get scholarship. And I think that's where there's a great misunderstanding on behalf of parents. Look, the number of kids who are getting college scholarships for soccer is minimal. I think the average college scholarship for soccer, dollar-wise, is about $7,000 to $10,000, and so there's not the kind of money they think out of there, unless less than 1% of the high school population who play soccer is going to be a Division I player, right? And I think 5 to 7% are going to be somewhere in the D2, D3 category. So my advice to parents and to prospects is, when you start playing club soccer and you start getting interest from D3, D2 schools, and primarily D3, D2 schools, don't ignore them. Because if they're at an event, 2 or 3 events, and they know that there are Division I coaches on the sideline and Division II coaches on the sideline and Division III coaches on the sideline, and they are only getting letters from D2, D3 coaches, that's where they should be looking, because it's a self-selecting process, if you will. And if they ignore those opportunities, they wait till their senior year with the hopes that they're going to find a chance at D1, then they're going to lose out on opportunities. And that's why there's that sense of panic, that sense of frustration, that sense of, oh my gosh, what do I do now? And candidly, there are very few recruiting services that I'm aware of. And I'm so happy that you're in one and managing one, because you're focused on the educational part of it. We need more Elliots out there. And not that I want you to have more competition, but you understand the process, both being as a college athlete and a college coach. You know what the process is all about. And it's not rocket science, but we have to inform parents at the earliest age possible, not their junior, senior year, really at their freshman, sophomore years, where we need to grab a hold of parents.
That's funny, because that's the next question I was going to lead into, is when you feel parents should start educating themselves on that process, right? Would you be able to maybe elaborate on that a little bit? Like, is there anything else out there that you know of that helps educate parents early on in the process, or am I the anomaly? I guess is sort of the question.
There isn't, and shockingly, there isn't enough. There are not enough resources or platforms or services that are providing the education. What a lot of these platforms provide is an intention or a goal to get your kid a scholarship, and that's just completely misleading. That's not going to happen. And so I know that parents will invest in anything that says, yeah, look, we've gotten so many kids a scholarship, we'll get you to Division I level. And I think that's misleading. And look, I'm not going to suggest that these recruiting services aren't, genuine in what they're trying to do, which is place kids in college. But I think that they put in front of these parents hopes and dreams that probably aren't going to happen. Very few of them are committed to the educational process early on. And this is the reality of college athletics. This is the reality of college soccer. This is how recruitment works. There are over 200 around 200 Division I schools, 300 Division II schools, 400. There are close to 800 colleges that offer soccer. There's no reason that a kid can't find a place to go play soccer and get a degree. There's no reason for that. As long as they're being educated about the possibilities that are out there and the timing of everything and how things operate and work.
The recruitment agencies have done an incredible job to create this narrative throughout the youth sports landscape, that without them, they're screwed. And I am a huge opponent to that. I think it's complete BS. So I'd love to hear from your side, Dean. What have the agencies and services done for you as a coach? The pros and cons, like laid out there, right? If parents really want to know if they go with a service, if they go with an agency like an NCSA or a Be Recruited, and I know those are the juggernauts, right? But there's 1,000 of those out there. What are they going to get from it? What are they going to leave with? Is my question overall. From your experience, right? That's all you can do.
Yeah, look, I think what I've learned is that these services provide opportunities for a number of players who think that they may not have the kind of exposure or the opportunity that they'd hoped for. Maybe they're playing in a club that doesn't get to these major tournaments where the vast majority of Division I coaches play or recruit from. Maybe a kid is in an area of the country that just doesn't get, they don't get a lot of exposure because of where they live. And I get it. Like, I think that, they need more help in order to give them some exposure. The challenge with a lot of these recruiting services, and I get where they come from, is that they want to do right by everybody, and they want to make sure that every kid finds a home. And the net of that is sometimes they're overselling kids, and not in a way that is meant to be subversive in any way. I think that they're just trying to help a kid. I get that, and I take that with a grain of salt. But the reality is that if I do a good job in my recruiting with my staff, and I think we do, and I know we do, we don't rely upon the scouting services, recruiting services to help us identify kids. That we need to own it. We need to make sure that we subscribe to our own values and our own recruiting process in a way that we don't need the recruiting services to help us fill out a class. However, if we have an opportunity to bring in an international kid from Africa, and provide a young man of African descent who has really good grades, who wants an opportunity in our country and is a first generation kid, look, that service might be of great value to us and to this young man, and we would not ignore that. And so there are always kids out there like that, but we aren't going to invest in or put any time into the recruiting services because it's my job to find the kids. And so I appreciate that's a business model for them that's working for them and good for them. I need the parents to understand is that most Division I coaches, most, not all, don't lean heavily on the recruiting services to identify their prospects. And most of us, those that do, are probably going to be leaning on the international prospects, not the domestic.
What is the best way for a student athlete in high school who might be a little bit underrated? Maybe he lives out in the woods, somewhere where he doesn't play on the best club team. What's the best way for him or her, female side, to contact a coach? At Lehigh, would it be an email, a phone call, a video? Like, what are some new ways that you might be seeing, players trying to reach out to you, and what works and what doesn't?
Well, what doesn't work is when a parent calls me on behalf of their son or daughter. I'm not interested in talking to the parent unless they have questions that are financial, economic,
right,
academic. But for the most part, we really need that 17-year-old, 16, 17-year-old to reach out to us. And email is probably the best method of doing that. And what we need to know is, one, your interest in Lehigh and why you're interested in Lehigh, and what your academic profile is, but also if you're interested in soccer, we need to know a little bit about your soccer background. What's your club team? What events are you going to be playing in that we may attend? What's your number? What position you play, and if a kid writes us and we are at that event, that after reading that he wrote us, 99% of the time we will go see him play, as a courtesy to them reaching out to us. Now we might go see a game. So I was in Florida this weekend, or this past week, recruiting at the USYS event, and I had a list of kids. If I show up at a half, and I might only be able to see them for that half that day, and they're not playing, there's nothing I can do about that. And sometimes the coaches rotate that, and then I'll try to circle back. But I really appreciate when a young man reaches out to us, expresses interest. It gives us as much information as we need. And we don't need that much other than the academic and the athletic profile and a little bit about him. That's all we need. And then we'll endeavor to see them play. If we don't get a chance to see you play because you are not attending any of the events, that your team isn't at the level that we go to. So your team isn't in USYS, your team isn't in MLS Next, your team isn't in ECNL. Those are the major events that we go see. If you're not in those events, and it's incumbent upon that person to try to get to our campus, to one of our ID clinics, to get in front of us. And that's the next best way to see a young man, is to get right in front of us and be on campus.
There's a formula not a formula, but I have my student athletes reach out 7 days prior to arrival, right? To introduce themselves, make the staff understand and aware that they're going to be coming and attending, and also to let the coach know that this player has interest in being recruited and being looked at as a potential candidate for the X year. And then I tell them, if you don't hear back from that coach, just follow up with a phone call. And a phone call, leave a message and just reiterate what you had written in the email. When you arrive, introduce yourself, let them know that you have called, let them know your intentions once again, and then ask if you could schedule some feedback on the end, like the end side of the camp, right? Towards the end, after you've had the opportunity to evaluate them as a prospective student athlete. Good advice, bad advice. How would you change that advice? Would you add anything or take anything away from that?
None of the advice is bad advice. And I think the message that you're sending them is take ownership of the process, right? And that's so important. I would tell you that all we need is an email from them in advance that they're going to show up. We may or may not respond, just we might say, hey, great, look forward to see you. But for the most part, as long as we know they're going to be there and they've reached out to us, that's great. Introducing themselves when they first come in for the day, they'll register with coach, our associate head coach, Ryan Hess. He'll know 99% of the names before the camp even starts. I'll know 25% before the camp starts, but I'll know 99% by the time the camp is over. We don't want them coming up to us after the camp because it's too fresh, it's too soon. What we do is all of us take copious notes on every kid. And then if we have an ID clinic on a Saturday or Sunday, we'll meet on a Monday. We'll share those notes. We'll put them into a system that we have so that we have consistency there. And then we ask the prospects to give us a week, email Coach Hess and say, hey, I was at your camp. I'd really like some feedback. And then Coach Hess will send them the feedback. And what we say to most of the kids, look, if it's not a fit for us, we'll tell you that. But if we think that there's a better fit somewhere else for you, or you're interested in another school like a D3 or D2 school, we will have the notes on you. They can call us. Those coaches can call us. We'll be a reference for you. We'll be honest with what we saw and whether we think it's a good fit for them or not. But use us as a reference. You've just invested, $100 some to come to our ID clinic. You've spent half a day here. You've been in front of myself and my staff, and we invite Muhlenberg and Raven and any local coaches that come. We want to help you find a home, and we'll have a college session with the kids explaining that in the middle of as a break, and just say to them, listen, there's a college for all of you. You just have to be open-minded looking at all those colleges. 60 to 70% of my current roster has passed through an ID clinic. And so it helps us to get to know them, but we've also seen them in clubs. In club settings. What I like about the ID clinics at Lehigh is that if I see a kid in a club setting who's a right midfielder, and I think he'd be a better right back for us, I can move him and put him in a right back position and see him in that role. And I don't need to walk up to the coach, which I would never do, and ask him to move the kid around. So it gives us some controls. What we can't control is the level. Right. Sometimes the level is very good. Sometimes the level is just okay. It's never bad, but we can't control the level. And sometimes we'll have some really good kids show up and the level's just okay. And we might not see the best of them, but now I want to see how they handle that. Do they make the players better around them? But the only thing I would tweak is ask them to just say, at the end of the day, we thank everybody. They come shake our hands, and then we'll give them feedback after about a week.
Data. The wearable software that kids are able to now put on, strap on, and provide numerical data for coaches, whether that's in games and training. Is that something you are going to look at? You are looking at? You think will grow and grow as we, dive into that more and more? Or have you not dealt with it at all yet?
We haven't dealt with it much on the recruiting side. And I suspect that that's coming down the pike because we use it within our program. Right. That data is important to us. It's important to us on a lot of different levels, from competition into practice habits and training loads and all that. I'm not really interested in a prospect's training load. Mm-hmm. I might be interested in if a good example would be if I go watch a kid play in a tournament, I'm like, well, it doesn't look like he works very hard, or it doesn't look like he's putting the time in and off the ball, that kind of work. Right. And I know that the club and that coach has access to that data of how much ground he's covered, what his workload was like, how many sprints he had. Like, if they have access to that, that would be interesting to me. Right. That may or may not determine whether I'm going to recruit a kid, because at the end of the day, it's I got to have eyes on him, and I got to see him as a player. I would tell you that what's more important to us is soccer intelligence and technical ability. And look, kids are not going to make it at any level if they're lazy, no matter how talented they are. And it's very rare that you see lazy kids. Some kids don't work hard because they're not asked to work hard. But I think if they have come from a good family and they have good character, that we can help them with that. We recruited a young man years ago that we didn't offer him a scholarship because I was a little bit worried about his training habits. but I liked his potential. And I shared that with him in the recruiting process, and we didn't scholarship him, but he came in and he worked on those things, so much so that he became one of the best players in the league, and I ended up giving him a scholarship his senior year because he worked towards it. And so I do believe that kids can change with the right environment and the right kind of coaching.
What do you look for personally as far as that whole package? You mentioned some things earlier. You look at some of some of the other things that they do outside of soccer, outside of the classroom, right? Can you expand on that a little bit?
Sure. The academic profile is going to be important to not only to us, but to admissions. And that will begin with their academics, what kind of classes they're taking, how many AP classes they have, what kind of academic rigor they have. If they have good academic rigor and are challenging themselves and they're an AB student, they're going to be fine here. If they don't have academic rigor, they don't have any AP classes, they're just in honors classes and they're getting A's and B's, that's not a great predictor of success. And so admissions will look at that stuff very closely. Your SATs and ACTs become important in giving us another picture, but as you know, a lot of schools right now are not requiring that. And so that presents some really good opportunities for kids to really showcase what they can do in the classroom. And my advice to any kid that is looking at a school like Lehigh, if you're going into your junior year, take some AP classes that you can get an A and B and that you're interested in. Don't take an AP class that you're not good at or not interested in, get a C out of that, but show some academic rigor, challenge yourself. As relates to community service, schools like Lehigh would much rather see you have a job, a paying job than community service, because every kid has to fulfill community service within their high school. And it's almost become a little bit of all right, more community is great. And not that it's a bad thing, but kids, they have to do it. Very few kids have to work. And I don't know what it was like when you grew up, but by the time I graduated college, I probably had 8 or 9 different jobs, and it shows kids. It shows that a kid has responsibility. It shows that a kid could compartmentalize it with school and sports and a job and working a job where you're getting paid hourly and have a boss you have to report to is an important skill set to have. And very few kids coming up today have jobs. Whether it's babysitting jobs, whether it's working at the grocery store, whether it's cutting lawns, whether it's shoveling, anything that they can add to their experience besides school, soccer, and volunteering is going to make them really unique and distinctive. And lastly is make sure that they represent who they are. Most schools are not interested in kids showcase themselves in a way that doesn't represent who they are. And Elliot, that when people interview, we'd much rather them be themselves so that we know what we're hiring. And if they don't get the job, that's okay. Be yourself when you go through interviews and meet with coaches. Don't try to be anybody else. And if it's a good fit, it's a good fit. If it's not, that's okay too. That there's going to be another fit elsewhere. And that becomes really nerve-wracking for kids when they're sitting in our office and with their mom and dad who want them to say all the right things. I'm like, just be yourself, And so when I ask a kid what his favorite book is, if he doesn't have one, I want him to say, look, I don't really have a favorite book.
Right.
I asked a young man one day, it's like, look, if you could have, dinner with anybody, living or dead, who would it be? And usually we get these really amazing responses. And this kid said, well, I think Samantha. I'm like, Samantha? Yeah, Samantha's in my math class. I would really like to have dinner with her, right? And I recruited the kid because I loved his honesty and loved his character. And so those things like that matters.
Parents help guide the student athlete, but don't do for the student athlete. And the student athlete really needs to take ownership, as you mentioned, because ultimately it's going to be for their own success, right? So yeah,
the parents should be involved in the process so that they can help guide, as you said, their kids. Parents have a little bit more wisdom than the kids do, and they should have some input. But the parents who also stand back and say, look, it's going to be his decision. We just want to support them and we want to be informed as well about what he's thinking. Those are the kids that usually make the best decisions. And that includes what they want to major in. If parents are influential in what a kid majors in, sometimes that backfires because It's not really what a kid wants, but it's that saying that I've used for most of my career. You can, as a parent, you can either prepare your kid for the path, or you can prepare the path for the kid. We want the kid whose parents prepared them for the path, because if they're prepared for the path of life and the path of college, they're going to be able to pick themselves up when things go wrong. But if parents are constantly preparing the path for kids, at halftime, mom's running over and giving the kid the Gatorade bottle because he didn't pack it, or going out and buying a pair of socks or shirts because shorts he didn't bring them to the game, those are yellow flags for us. And we always appreciate loving parents and parents who care a lot, but I also really appreciate when a parent drops a kid off, for the freshman year and says, "He's all yours. Good luck. We've done our job. Now let him grow under your tutelage." And so, look, at the end of the day, my job as a coach, the end of the day, is to help foster the development of a 17-year-old boy, 18-year-old boy into a 22-year-old man. And if I can be a part of that process and part of that development, then I'm very fortunate.
As far as the recruitment process goes, let's just sort of break it down to like your final words. If you were to provide any type of guidance or any type of information to a parent that you feel that they need to know or they don't usually have, now's the time. I want you to speak to the parent and just sort of unleash to them.
Well, first and foremost, if playing club soccer or if college soccer is important to you, they need to be invested in club soccer. Mm-hmm. And whether they agree or disagree with that platform, that's the reality of it all. And if they're playing on a competitive club team that is either in the USYS system, that includes EDP, or the ECNL platform, or the MLS Next, the likelihood of their kids getting exposed to college coaches is really high. If they're playing for their local town team and they are only traveling to the smaller tournaments around the area, the region, whatever, it's likely they're not going to see as many college coaches at those events, and therefore may not get as much exposure. And that doesn't mean there aren't good kids in that level. They're going to have to get to ID clinics and summer camps and all those things. But parents should go into it, and prospects should go into it, by their end of their sophomore or junior year with an open mind to any possible college. Don't put all their eggs in Division I. Keep their mind open to every and all opportunities to be recruited. Look at the priorities, as you said, academics, environment, and athletics, and certainly the social can play a role in that. But at the end of the day, they have to understand that there are over 600, 700 college programs that they can choose from. Right. And to be as open-minded as possible. If they get an email from a D2, D3 coach that they're not initially interested in, respond, say, right now, I don't see you in my list, but I like to keep the relationship open. Right. Don't close any doors, ever close any doors. And then just let the process, play out to the best interest of what your son wants, not what you want as parents, and lean on the financial aid process. Hope for merit money in the academic side, and you won't see a lot of that at the higher schools and the Ivies and the Patriot Leagues. But there's a lot of academic money out there in D2, D3, and a lot of financial aid to lean on too. And more cases, in most cases, there's more financial aid. In all cases, more financial aid than there is athletic scholarships. And please don't put your basket or all your eggs in that basket of athletic scholarship in Division I soccer, because that's where you get really frustrated and disappointed.
That's great. Thank you so much for your time. It was incredible. I think it's really important, like we've spoken about so many times, that we educate the parents on the conversation that we had, right? So what are some of the questions that they could ask you as the head coach? What are some of the ways to get in contact with head coaches, assistant coaches, the coaches that are, spearheading the recruitment process? And I think without a doubt, you helped thousands of parents that just didn't know where to begin. So thank you so much for that. That's awesome.
Elliot, thank you so much for having me on, and I'm wishing you all the best. This is such a great platform, and go after it. You're doing a great job.